and welcome. I am your host, Lori Krieg, and I am with my favorite licensed therapist, Argyle expert, and my husband, Matt Krieg.
Hello.
Hey, Matt. And the most professional radio voice among us, producer Steve, is not with us today because he's got the Rona. So he is quarantining, and Matt and I are, because we're also in shelter in place now in Michigan, we're in our what's called affectionately by our kids, the spooks in our house, the down spooky stairs. But guys, if you were watching this on the Vimeo or YouTube, you could see where we are at. And you could also see our special guest today, who is it? It's the one and only Scott Sauls. Scott, welcome.
Thanks for having me, you guys. This will be fun.
Yeah, we're so excited. I have so appreciated your book and you from afar. I really just appreciate that you are a leader who is trying to lean into many challenging spaces, walking the road of grace and truth in many different challenging conversations. And so when you engage that well, you just only get respect points from us who are trying our best as well. But for those of you who don't know Scott, he's the senior pastor of Christ Presbyterian Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and the author of books like Irresistible Faith. And today's focus, his latest book, A Gentle Answer, Our Secret Weapon in an Age of Us Against Them. And secret has air quotes, well, not air quotes, secret weapon has quotes around it. But before coming to Nashville, Scott served at New York City's Redeemer Presbyterian Church, aka Tim Keller's church, which you all know if you listen to this podcast for more than a few minutes, know that I'm a super fan. But he was a lead and preaching pastor and planted 2 churches. He has written all over the place, and you can find his insightful blogs weekly at scottsauls.com. So excited to dive in, but we are going to tiptoe into the deeper conversation about a gentle answer in 2020. Help us, Scott and Jesus. With the question of the week from last week, which is this: what's your favorite big holiday meal leftover mashup? So, a lot of people get creative with leftovers. Scott, do you get creative?
I don't get creative. I just ask my wife. My wife, Patty, makes this amazing homemade cranberry sauce. And so I just ask her to make like a quadruple batch. And sometimes I'll just eat that for my meal. Not really good for the sugar levels, but yeah, that's my post-Thanksgiving indulgence typically.
So she's not using the old hand cranking open a can of cranberry slop and just throwing it on a plate?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, that's what we used to do. And then we had Thanksgiving with some people in our church. I think it was in Kansas, when we were in Kansas City. And somebody made this incredible stuff and cranberry sauce. And so Patty got the recipe, and then she put her own twist to it. And it's been a highlight ever since.
Love it. Matt, what listener response stood out to you?
Yeah, I really liked what Terry had to say on Facebook. She said, my grandma and granny always made their stuffing into little patties and fried them on a griddle, tons of them. We found we would heat them up and eat them with our eggs in the morning for the rest of the weekend. Not a mashup, but really so yum. And it sounds delicious because it sounds like stuffing hash browns, which I don't know how you can go wrong with that.
I love it.
Yeah, any level of Thanksgiving leftovers, I am down to eat.
I appreciated this from Jasmine on Instagram. She said, bubble and squeak. That's a thing in the US, right? No, I don't know what it is. I feel like I've seen it on the Food Network, but I hope I asked her to send us some more information, so I hope that she does. I am with you, Scott. I don't get that creative. I don't love cooking. I love baking. And so I think just smashing everything together into leftover part 2 of just the exact same things, great for me. Now, Scott, this is almost embarrassing to ask you this question because we just stole it from Keller and then flipped it around based on some feedback we got from Kurt Thompson to start with the love part instead of the sinful part. So, as you know, Tim Keller says, what the gospel is, I'm more loved than I imagine, yet more sinful than I believe. So if that's the gospel, then when was that gospel first good news for you, Scott? and how is it still?
Oh, well, I first heard the gospel and had it embodied to me by a man named Mark McGoldrick, who remains a friend of mine. He's been on the staff for Crew for years. He's still on their staff, and he was when he introduced me to the gospel. For the first time I'd ever heard the gospel, how old was I? I was you're 17 or 18 years old, heading into basketball practice, and he just kind of literally jumped out of the bushes at high school. And I think a couple of my teammates in high school were Christians, and they were in one of the Bible studies Mark led, and they put him up to telling me about Christ. I guess, somehow God had, put me on their minds and hearts, and they knew that I showed up typically an hour early to basketball practice, and, to stretch and just kind of hang out and that sort of thing. And so there he was, hiding behind a bush. He jumped out, and it was a little bit scary, but also intriguing. And he, took me through this. I guess it was called the 4 spiritual laws back then, and that was just the first time anybody had ever walked me through, at least the way he put it, was what it could look like to have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was intrigued, and I guess it was like the seed that fell on the ground and kind of got choked during the college years. And what really took was when a girl that I thought I was going to marry in college dumped me for a friend of mine right before my senior year. And Christianity was way in the background, and it was thrust to the foreground as a bunch of other Christian friends in college came around me just to encourage me through that season. And that was when the gospel really took, and felt the love of Christ really through my fellow students there at Furman University, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I've been falling in and out of love with Christ ever since, with my fickle heart, but his love has remained steady for me, which I'm very grateful for.
I love that. So we didn't just ask you that because of your background at Redeemer, but we've been asking that set of questions to every guest for the last 150 episodes. And so something that always stands out to me is some of these pillars of the faith right now. I would consider you one of them. Like, someone took a risk. They jumped out of the literal bushes, but they took a risk to share the gospel, and look at the fruit that was produced. It always exhorts me.
Yeah. Well, and so you said kind of how it started, and then you talk about your currently fickle heart falling in and out of love. Is there a more specific way that the gospel has just hit you recently or right now?
Yeah, right now, we made a decision to pivot on our Advent series, and just because of what 2020 has been and COVID and everything else, we were going to do a series on the mothers of Jesus, the women in Jesus's genealogy, which we're gonna put that on hold until next year, and can't wait to do that. But one of our creative arts director and sort of chief liturgist, Nathan Tasker, came up with an idea that we boot off of that lyric where it talks about how a weary world rejoices in O Holy Night. He said, what would you think about maybe doing a series called A Weary World Rejoices? And all of us, we have 4 different locations for our church and 4 different, pastors at the different sites. And all 4 of us were like, yes, yeah, that's so obvious. We don't even need to answer the question. And so we decided to do an extended Advent series that started last Sunday, walking through Isaiah. Every year our church has done a performance for the city of Nashville of Handel's Messiah, and this year, for obvious reasons, we can't do that. And so we're preaching through essentially the Isaiah texts that you find in Handel's Messiah. And I have been freshly struck by the call that Isaiah accepted, right? So most churches right now, if things are going well, most churches are seeing, in America at least, about 40% of their people returning to in-person gatherings. And then the other 60 are still out there, either disengaged or doing online and just, staying safe and taking extra precaution. And that's kind of stunk. I mean, it's led to, I think the last stat that I've heard from Barna is that 70% of pastors right now are looking for other work. And that's not an exaggeration, 70%. And, Tom Rainer wrote this article a few weeks ago, 6 reasons why your pastor's about to quit. Like just COVID has been kind of crushing to a lot of pastors, especially, just like it has with touring artists and other people whose livelihoods and, main thing depend on people gathering. And so Isaiah, it's been remarkable because his call, the call that he said, "Here I am, send me to," was essentially, God saying to him, the moment you start preaching the stuff I'm going to give you to preach, 90% of the people are going to drop off the radar. And Isaiah had no return to normal after that. His whole life and ministry was just, like Sisyphus unsuccessfully trying to push that rock all the way to the top of the hill, and then it rolls back down and he goes back and repeats. And just the perspective of Isaiah being one of the most hopeful books in the Bible, written by a man who had just so many despairing circumstances. And, the history books say that he was sawn in two, and that's how his life ended. If he can be hopeful, then surely we can be hopeful too. If God can be up to remarkable things as he was in Isaiah's life, even though Isaiah never saw any of the fruit in his own lifetime, then we can be hopeful that God's up to some really remarkably important things right now, even if we can't see them. It's a long answer, but that's where I'm getting my encouragement right now.
Yeah. Dang, Scott, that's like worth the price of the podcast, which is free. But for me, I'm like, thank you for your time and exhorting us just now.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely need that hope. And I definitely pray that is a series that lands just full of hope for the people that hear it. And now we are talking about your book, A Gentle Answer. And obviously you wrote it about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, right after election time.
2 years ago.
Because it seems like there's a lot of wrath.
What's that?
It seems like there's a lot of wrath we got to try to turn away. But why did you write this book?
Yeah.
Well, originally I was just thinking, remember it was 2 years ago. And remember 4 years ago, we had a really hotly, ugly contested presidential election, right? And I thought,
that one.
Yeah, and I was thinking, kind of midstream, right? It's probably going to get ugly in 2020 as well around politics. And that's really all I was thinking was, Christians didn't handle Clinton Trump very well. The Democrat leaning and Republican leaning Christians, nobody handled it well. And I thought, maybe I'll put something out there that might, potentially have a heart softening effect and maybe increase the empathy quotient for more Christians, so we can maybe have a bit better witness than we did last time. Too bad, so sad. Didn't happen this time either. But the hope was that I could put something out there that would, that whoever read the book, maybe it would help move the needle, toward kindness and away from being brash and abrasive and defensive and all these other things that Christians seem to have mastered during political seasons now. And so, but then the rest of 2020 has also happened. Murder hornets, asteroid the size of Empire State Building headed toward the earth, a brain-eating amoeba in Texas, and all of the racial tension and it just seems like the year of the perfect storm in many ways. And of course, COVID, and so global pandemic. It's a well-timed book, but I'm really actually sad that for all the reasons why it's a well-timed book. I certainly didn't intend it that way, but it's turned out that way.
It comes across, it's so beautiful. I just kept getting this image of you kind of alone playing a melody, and then the whole rest of the world is playing either in minor key or in like just disunity, and you're trying to walk against the storm. And I was like, woo, reading it like right now. I was like, this is so poignant and it's beautiful. Like it's musical. There's a melodic tone to it, but it's so countercultural. And I just keep thinking about how even 2 years, 4 years ago, even, you know, you could post things. It's like, guys, we got to love our enemies. Remember? Now you say love your enemies and people are like, shut up, enemy. Like, and that's like Christians basically say that. So like, what broke? Why are we broken?
Well, the self-justifying mechanism of the human heart just reorganizes itself, you know, and I think that's probably what happened. It has been a bit alarming to see so many Christians get ticked off at the kindness message and at the you know, essentially the Beatitudes message, which essentially, if your life isn't resembling the Beatitudes, you've got really good reason to ask yourself whether or not you're aligned with Jesus Christ. Look, this is the guy who he took it on the chin, and then it took it on the chin again, and the only people he bowed up against were people who were bowing up against everybody. You know, the scribes and the Pharisees who, you know, used their religion as a weapon in order to, you know, preserve their own power, and they use the scriptures as a weapon and as a PR opportunity is how they use the Bible on a regular basis, and then also, you know, Roman people in power, you know, like Pilate, you know, although Jesus wasn't really aggressive, he was just kind of dismissive to their, you know, don't you know I can let you go, Pilate says, and, you know, yeah, you wouldn't have any authority unless my Father in heaven had given it to you, you know, just, and so those are really the only people he gets snippy with, and you know, he gets angry at death at Lazarus's tomb, and he gets, of course, angry at corrupt worship in the temple and flips the tables and everything. But outside of that, you know, seventh I am statement, I am gentle. I am gentle and humble in heart. And, you know, he's a giver of rest to the human soul. And so it is a bit alarming to hear Christians say, oh, we gotta be prophetic. Well, you know what? Be careful, because that Pharisee impulse seems to be driving a lot of the Christian conversation right now, especially in the social media space. But there are exceptions. I mean, I think there's a reason why Mr. Rogers is so popular again. I think there's a silent majority, and with emphasis on the word majority, that craves what, you know, Mr. Rogers brought. You know, the kindness, the tenderness, the empathy. You know, the wanting to step in other people's shoes, but you know, it's not a question of whether or not it's okay to be angry, because there is a form of righteous anger. The Bible, you know, in its original text says, be angry and sin not. It's actually a command, you know, to hate evil and cling to what is good. You know, the two go together. They're not separate. They're not contradictory. But I think, you know, righteous anger and raging anger are two different kinds of anger. And I think there are a lot of Christians who act like their raging anger is actually righteous anger when it's not righteous. Righteous anger attacks problems. Raging anger attacks people. You know, the righteous anger that attacks problems especially attacks problems that attack people. But it's raging anger that attacks people. You know, we're supposed to love our enemies, not put them in their place.
Oh, so good.
So I like how you phrased something that you said. You said that if you don't have the Beatitudes kind of reflected in your life, you would question not whether someone is Christian, but you said you would question whether or not they are aligned with Christ. And I just like that is a very, I don't know, not dismissive, not defensive. I don't even know what word. It's disarming, that phrase, because so many people will be like, I am a Christian, you know, right. And because that word has such kind of cultural commonality, I guess, but to be united or to be aligned with Christ is something that is much more specific, I guess, in what it conveys. And I guess with that, okay, there's been a lot of calls for unity. There's been a lot of calls for kindness. if we are to align ourselves with Christ, what would that kindness and unity look like?
It's a great question. It's a really great question, and I'm trying to think of a context to locate the question into. Let's locate your question into the context of politics. What it looks like to align with Christ might look like the loudest voices grieving and lamenting the assault on the unborn in America should be Christian Democrats who are so grieved that their own party is overlooking this atrocity that's happening to millions, literally millions of image bearers. It should be Christian Democrats, not Christian Republicans, that are screaming the loudest, in the same way that I believe it should be Christian Republicans who are screaming the loudest about asylum seeking children being separated from their parents at the border. Why is my party not taking more of a public stand to get this fixed? And in other words, it looks like logs and specks as applied to our tribe, as applied to our echo chambers. So our echo chambers aren't echo chambers anymore.
Yeah.
We have to be able to affirm what the other side is maybe doing better than our side is, so that we don't have sides anymore, right? Think about how State of the Union address always goes, right? You've got, a president stands up and the first words out of the president's mouth are always, the state of our union is strong. And then the rest of the speech proves that statement is not true, because half of the room stands up and half the room sits down, during the whole speech. I think if the world were looking into church sanctuaries, they would see Christian Republicans and Christian Democrats standing for the same things and sitting and lamenting over the same things. In other words, our alignment, our allegiance is first and foremost with Jesus, whose kingdom is not of this world, and only secondarily, in a distant second, to some political party. So I guess that's how I'd maybe put it in that context, since it's so current.
So Matt and I speak a lot into sexuality, marriage, gender, some conversational. That one's a little trickier in the context of the gospel. And we have to do a lot of heart work before we even get on a stage, just to make sure that our words are tender and gentle, and I'm not trying to fix and control, and my heart is motivated by the Holy Spirit as opposed to hatred. Like, is that what you would say if someone's like, okay, I need to take a stand on something? How do they know if they should take a stand on something, and then how to take a stand on something so that it's the singular violin playing the melody against the world's noise?
There is a speaking truth to power element of public faith, right? Our faith is not meant to be privatized. It's meant to be a very public expression of who we are, what we believe, and what we believe to be Christ's vision for a flourishing world and a flourishing society. So I think that it looks like valuing what John Anazu, who might be somebody you might consider having on your podcast as well. He's a Washington University law professor and sort of public intellectual. John Anazu calls confident pluralism. In other words, Christians should not desire a Christian society where essentially the moral values of Christianity are imposed on every person in society. That's what you call a theocracy. And, we are a democracy or or some people call it a constitutional republic, right? But we are a melting pot of ideas. And if Christians really believe that Jesus Christ gives the most cohesive, the most life-giving vision for human and societal and vocational and cultural flourishing in the 66 books of the Bible and in his life, death, burial, and resurrection. If we really believe that his vision exceeds anything else that has ever been put out by any other religion or philosophy, then it seems like we should be pretty relaxed in terms of our posture and demeanor, with a sense of quiet, settled, humble confidence that the truth of Christ is going to prevail, and to feel less threatened by whatever's going on in the halls of power, because guess what? There's a subversive power called the kingdom of God that's going to just upend every prideful structure and every imperfect structure, which is essentially every structure that human beings erect on our own. And so if we believe that Christ is the smartest person that ever lived, why are we threatened by ideas that contradict, and engaging ideas that contradict what we believe? Wouldn't we want to instead, like the Apostle Paul did in Acts chapter 17 with the Athenian Greek academics, say, hey, all right, how's that worldview working out for you? Because it seems to me like you're still groping. It seems to me like your noble quest for truth, which he praises at the very beginning, is not really leading anywhere except to just more confusion and chaos. Let me try to bring it all together. Let's try to bring together the good ideas from your belief systems, right? You're quoting the Stoics over here who say, in him we live and move and have their being. Guess what? I've memorized your Stoic philosophers. It's in my brain. It's in my memory because it's true. And so let's take that here. And then let's take what the Epicureans say. We are all God's offspring. And I believe that too, but in a different way than maybe the Epicureans. Let's just bring that all together. We're agreed on these things. Now let me tell you how Christ puts it all together. And let me tell you how Christ dismantles all the other bullcrap that your belief systems, are destroying. Let me tell you why your belief systems are destroying people. Let me tell you why communism has never worked. Let me tell you why, Nietzscheanism has never worked. Let me tell you why, Seattle grunge culture, doesn't work, ultimately, even though there are redeeming true aspects of all of them. Christ is the owner of all truth. And so if you bring all truth under Christ, that's when it all starts to become cohesive, and it starts to work, and it starts to create flourishing in whatever and whomever and wherever it touches. And so I think there's a really winsome, life-giving way to carry that into the world. Like, don't tell people their belief systems are bull crap, like I just did, right? So, but there's a kind-hearted, gentle, persuasive way to do it. Like let's talk about, if Francis Schaeffer was a master at this. Like his whole approach was to take people to the logical conclusion of their belief system. Like, let's just go there and see where this is leading. And then let's compare and contrast it to where belief in the gospel leads. And then you make your choice. And we're going to be friends regardless of what direction you go. We're still going to be friends as far as I'm concerned. And so, even in like the sexuality conversation, which I know you guys are like in the dead center of all the time, your lives, your convictions, your commitments, your leadership and influence. I hope more and more and more and more people will listen to you guys. And learn from your story. But even in that conversation, things can just get so derailed, and people can get so triggered and so injured by just careless words and just careless postures. Well-intended people who are just being careless. And I think if we take the tone and the content of the gospel, especially as expressed through the life of Christ toward sexual minorities in his experience, what an amazing resource the Church of Jesus Christ would be to people who are dealing with any form of sexual brokenness, or pursuing sexual health, So,
I think that's one of the gifts that we try and bring, and I pray, I just love what you're saying, I just can't stop nodding, is telling people it's okay to calm down. Like, we don't have to freak out, because no matter where people are running, no matter how much they're literally screaming in your faces, what they're screaming underneath that is, I just want and need Jesus. And so we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be scared. And our hair lights on fire in this space. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, it seems like so many of, and particularly in the sexuality conversation, so many people want to take the posture of Jesus flipping the tables over.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus didn't flip the tables over on the woman caught in adultery.
Ooh.
That was a time that he postured himself very low to the ground, got down on her level. That's right. Neither do I condemn you, but then still called to, hey, go and sin no more, after saving her life. And I guess if that posture that Jesus takes in a majority of his preaching and his life on earth was this gentleness towards sinners, how can that change the way that we interact with one another when we do have disagreement, when there is like an actual sin issue that's going on?
Yeah, well, in the book, the first 3 chapters try to take a different angle on that question, where we have to look first at what Christ has been for us before we can even have the conversation about what we're supposed to do for him. I mean, bear in mind that Matthew 11, where Jesus says, I'm gentle and humble in heart, and on the basis of that, come to me. He says that a full 17 chapters before he says, go for me, or do for me, or be for me, right? Like come to me is 17 chapters ahead of the Great Commission, right? And that order is really important, and that order was expressed in the way that he treated the woman caught in the act of adultery. He says, I do not condemn you, now leave your life of sin. The sequence is incredibly important there, because if you reverse the sequence, you lose Christianity and you lose Jesus, and you get something else. You get another gospel if you put, leave your life of sin, and then we'll get to the no condemnation conversation, maybe. And so I think with the question of how do we go out and be as Christ was to the world, we've got to look at, the book's got 3 chapters, how he disarms the cynic in us, how he reforms the Pharisee, and how he, I can't remember, like forgives the sinner in us or something like that. But sinners, Pharisees, and cynics, right? That represents all of our different, in general ways, our different forms of resistance toward the mercy of Christ. And but once we've experienced the mercy of Christ, it has this humbling effect on the one hand, but it also has this confidence boosting effect on the other, right? I am so bad that I needed that bloodbath on the cross in order to justly take care of what a train wreck I am. And yet I was and am so deeply loved by him that he was not only willing but eager to go through the bloodbath in order to have me as his own. And if that's what I'm operating out of, I just don't know how you're going to offend me after that. I just don't know how I'm ever going to think I've got the moral high ground on anybody after that, right? As Steve Brown likes to say, we're beggars. Like the Christian posture is beggars who are looking for other beggars to share with them where the bread is. That's what a Christian is supposed to be. That's how a Christian is supposed to position themselves in a culture that's turning in on itself with outrage. Is hey, there's some bread over here. Come try some bread. But yeah, we got a long way to go.
Well, if someone is listening and maybe like the woman caught in adultery, they can see themselves on the edge with a stone in their hand, and it's like it feels gorilla glued there, and it's like I'm always ready to attack, and maybe they kind of hate that in themselves. Or maybe like many of us, maybe it's the silent majority, is like, I am so sick of any sentence I say being met with someone fighting me. Like pastors, it feels like you guys cannot win, no matter what you say or do. So what would you say to someone, and you take them separately or together, who's like, I'm so angry, and they're feeling maybe convicted by this conversation, or it's just like, I just don't even care anymore. I don't even care. What would you say to us?
Oh, I would say get into the book of Isaiah.
Right. Let's go back to the beginning.
That's what I would say. You know, especially chapter 6. And then, you know, thereafter, you know, comfort ye, comfort me, my people. You know, then Isaiah 9, you know, to us a child is born, a son has been given, and he will reign on David's throne, and of the increase of his government and rule there will be no end. Then, of course, the suffering servant passages in Isaiah 53, just to ground us in the sacredness and thoroughness of what Christ has done for us, you know, in his death in particular, and then that vision from Isaiah about the lamb and the lion and the children and the scorpions, you know, and the you know, defenseless animals all dwelling in peace, right? That whole metaphor of like Darwin's world coming to an end. And you know, where the strong eat the weak, and you know the I've always wondered why more children aren't traumatized by the Lion King circle of life concept, right? Like, we eat the antelopes, or the antelopes eat the grass, or they fertilize the grass, or they eat the grass, or something like that, and then we fertilize the grass. I mean, this is all the circle of life, all this blood and death, son. You know, it's like, you know, Isaiah says, no, you know, there's actually going to come a time where there isn't a circle anymore. It's just going to be life. And it's going to be life forevermore. And, you know, the unity and peace that we're all, you know, craving. I wonder why. I wonder if the reason why we're so on the attack is more a defense mechanism than it is, you know, outrage toward the other. We're just trying to protect ourselves from somebody else's outrage, and so we got to strike first or something. I don't know. I'm no sociologist. You're a counselor, therapist.
Matt,
so
fix us.
You can psychologize that and let us know, you know, what the deep root of all that is. But I don't know. I think kindness wins in the end. You know, we tell our teenagers, our students at church, you know, cool may win high school, but kindness wins life. So
that's right.
You know, consider kindness. The earlier, the better.
That's so good.
That's the fruit of the Spirit.
So good. Man, Scott, thank you so much for sharing your heart in this book. And I don't know, I just am leaving this conversation really encouraged. So thanks for being you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the invitation. It's good to meet you guys.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we'll finish up on this end, Scott. But have a great night. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you bet.
All right,
take care.
See ya.
Bye.
Oh, I fixed it other place. Okay, man, guys, didn't you like him, Matt?
Yeah, it was really good.
And you're coming up with some good deep questions right in the moment. The spooks is brain drying out some of your good question asking. Are you getting in therapy mode? Does this feel like therapy down here in down spooky stairs?
A little bit, maybe. I'd be facing that way though.
You'd be facing a different direction instead of a camera, this direction. But guys, seriously, go check out that book. I read it really quick. A Gentle Answer, Our Secret Weapon in an Age of Us Against Them by Scott Sauls. We do have a question of the week for next week, and it is this: what's the craziest competition you've ever done? like glow stick midnight football or a 0.1K fun run. I've seen those. And then
Nice.
the funnier part is when people put them on their cars. Or a game you made up when you have 11 brothers and sisters and you aren't going to just sit around and watch movies and eat just food. Although it's not that you don't do that. It's just too hard with like a billion of you. I want to hear about it. Hit me up at podcast@lorikrieg.com or find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and you can join our Hole in My Heart podcast Facebook group. That's where I reach out to most of you, and I'm a little bit more interactive on Facebook there because it's hard to respond to all the peoples, but I'm going to take that part again, Steve. You can also join the Hole in My Heart podcast Facebook group. I love to meet you there. We love to interact. There's a few hundred of you, and we'd love to have you join us. Thanks again to Scott Sauls for joining us today, and for all of us here, technically just the two of us, Matt and I at this point, of the two of us here. God bless Steve. Feel better at the Hole in My Heart podcast. We will see you next week.